Could I get you to talk about the national, you've gone twice to national conferences, and Sophie, you're going to BDS this summer maybe?
I'm hoping, yeah.
Yeah, so actually, here I'll be a shameless pitch for some fundraising. You have to go, you have to plane tickets and costs and things.
Yeah, it's actually not, yeah, I have to, it's travel, I'll be driving, but.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I think maybe we get a little support in this room, I will twist some arms. But Hannah, maybe you could talk about the 2 national gatherings you've gone to and what you learned about the whole picture in the United States from Oberlin in the Midwest.
Yeah, so Brittany's been to one of them. This year was the 2nd National SJP Conference. Our organization is called Students for a Free Palestine, because we were started like way back in the 80s. But most other organizations at other colleges are called Students for Justice in Palestine. And this year was the 2nd like national conference, and all like groups that could sent a couple representatives, and we were in Michigan this year, Ann Arbor. And it was really interesting, yeah, to learn about where other colleges are at, because we met students who've already worked on divestment campaigns at their schools. We met students who passed boycott campaigns at their schools. We met students who were starting their own SJP by themselves at a very conservative school, and it was both inspiring and also like humbling, you know, to be in that room with so many people around the nation. It reminded me, you know, Oberlin's frustrating, how it can be very apathetic, but it was a good reminder of how lucky we are in some respects.
And you said you were inspired, but I remember
that. Right, yeah, I can say, yeah.
What inspired you? I was moved by that.
Okay, so I have had a very busy year. I have 2 like senior capstones I've been doing and work 4 jobs, and I do a lot of things. And I became I've been like one of the like de facto leaders of our group since my sophomore year, but kind of stopped being involved beginning of this year, just out of pure busyness. But I went to that conference, and it was just a good reminder. The Palestinian population at Oberlin is like 3 students right now, only one of whom is involved. So our organization is unique in that it's mostly white students who don't have like a direct connection. But I met at the national conference, it was almost entirely Palestinian students who were at various universities, and it was just a good reminder that like no matter how busy I am and whatever, like for them this is also like personal, and it's also their homes, and they also like it's like their families and their future and their children, and so that like was a good reminder for me of like I'm being selfish basically, and so but yeah, I got back involved after that. But, yeah.
Of these 6 companies,
yes.
I'm assuming the answer is no, or you've seen, you know, instances of your organizing, but does none of them have any site nearby that could be focused
like
on?
an actual like
yeah, an actual
Like
yeah.
A what? Where? Okay.
Yeah, they have a sales office out there.
We did a bunch of pickets out there.
Okay. So is that something that's involved, that your group is involved in? Protests or not?
Right now, in terms of our main goal this semester is to get our student senate to agree and to sign on to this, because we want the board of trustees to, and they see the student senate as like a representative of the student body. So in terms of that goal, we have not been engaged in protests outside of Oberlin very much this semester, just because we're kind of focused on that goal. Last semester, we were, what protest did we go to down in Cleveland about? Oh, when everything was going on with Gaza. Yeah, we're connected to some other folks in Cleveland who who we've gone to some protests with down in Cleveland. But just in terms of pursuing this specific goal, we haven't so much been in protests outside of it.
But there aren't any except for the Caterpillar
in
the area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you written about these goals to all the student newspapers of the other year?
Yeah, this week there were, so we had written to the student newspaper last week, and then this week the 2 main student publications both wrote separate pieces about what we've been doing.
How about outside of Oberlin?
So far, we are hoping to reach out to local press as well as sort of like alternative news sources that often publish stuff about Palestine. We are like waiting to have enough endorsement and enough signatures to sort of like say like we're ready to publish this article. But yeah, we're working on this.
So right now the campaign is mainly focused on lobbying your student senate.
For this semester, yeah.
How many members in your student senate?
I'm on our student senate. I have been for a couple of years. This wasn't like, I will not be able to vote on that. because of my position in this organization. There are 15 members, including myself, so 14 people will be able to vote. We have had a couple student senators already sign the resolution. It has to get a majority vote, which I don't actually know how that's going to work with 14 people. It'll be interesting. So far, I've been surprised though by who signed it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, I'm pleasantly surprised by that. Did you have more to say?
Yeah, I did ask, wonder one other question. Why would you not be able to vote on that?
Okay. Yeah, our student senate has a policy of when we're voting on issues, especially contentious ones, if you are heavily involved, it's your choice to recuse yourself, which is take yourself out of the vote, and that makes it so that like it's as if only 14 people are voting and I'm just like not in the room, which I will be in the room, but it's as if like I'm not there. And for me, that is technically my personal choice. I've been leading the group. This will be like the 3rd year. I'm like de facto leading. We're like a non-hierarchical organization. Oberlin has lots of them, but like if this passes, I want it to be as clean as possible, and I don't want there being anyone saying like, oh well, yeah, like she's on student senate, no wonder she voted for it.
Well, I'd like to just point out that people who run for office are normally people who take strong positions of heartfelt matters and back those.
Definitely.
Where a person will recurse themselves in a normal course of matter, whether you're in an elected office or like a judicial office or something like this, is if you have a stake to make money on it, that would be a conflict of interest. But if it's a matter of your heartfelt belief, that certainly would not be, under normal circumstances, a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I haven't made a full decision on it yet, and that's something I'm going to talk to the rest of Student Senate about, because I do agree, and I think I should be able to, but my main concern is actually how it'll just like look to the Board of Trustees, how it'll look to other people, and if they'll say, if I respectfully recuse myself, I think that will look much better than me being involved and people being, because normally that's just like our kind of policy. If you're leading another organization who brings a proposal, you usually recuse yourself, even if it's not contentious, just out of like saving face.
Could I interrupt for 1 second?
Go for it.
How much time there is, and I want to introduce some people that came in. So this is Doug Kerr and Ruth Tracy from Peace Action. Doug is the chair of our Middle East Peace Committee and past chair. Ruth and Janet and some other people do the Fair Trade olive oil, and perhaps our best emissary to church basements, and probably reach more people than all of us put together. I would also like to, Nader, if you introduce yourself and your 2 sons.
Yes, my name is Nader Mustafa. I am a Palestinian American. These are my sons, Nadi and Danny. We have been in the States since '99, and I have been actually active with local groups as far as my support and my encouragement of getting non-Arabs or non-Palestinians to actually get engaged in the process, because that way, for the same reason, if it's only Palestinians that are backing up the issue of Palestine and Free Palestine, what's an obvious reason why? Because this is our homeland, this is our countries, our grandparents, and to get the sympathy of non-Palestinians will give the cause a better, a bigger and a better picture. Either it's on the public media or just in social settings. So it's not just Palestinians speaking for themselves, it's non-Palestinians speaking for Palestinians, right? Because we're talking about civil rights, human rights, and God-given rights that have been taken away for the past 65 years, and we've lived the struggle.
And you said public, so initially you were a translator in Iraq, and you were raised in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, I was actually born and raised outside of Palestine too, so one of the reasons my parents were driven out of Palestine, my grandparents, this village that they lived in Palestine was called Fallujah. That is not the Fallujah of Iraq, just to clarify. And that city or that village no longer exists, it's been totally wiped out. So,
and have you been back to Palestine?
I've been, yeah, I've visited a couple of times. Once was for my sister's wedding. I do still have extended family, aunts and uncles and grandparents and and cousins, of course, in the Gaza as well as in the West Bank regions.
And do your sons have anything to say? How's school? No, speak up.
Nadi actually had the chance of visiting Palestine when he was only 3 years old, so his recollections may not be as vivid.
How's Shaker High School as far as a place to go to school? Do you have a good experience?
Well, it's just like any other high school, no real difference.
Does your identity matter anything in the high school?
Not really, because it's not really known that I am Arab. I don't know, I don't have that heavy accent. And even though I'm one of like maybe 3 Arabs in school, it's still like no.
There was a Palestinian named Jamal there 4 or 5 years ago who raised the issue. So by the time you were junior or senior, and Mark, you wanted to say something. Mark, do you have any comment? What could you say again? Your secular community?
Jewish secular community.
And do you have any comments from a perspective that you might carry to the room?
Well, only that the Jewish secular community is a diverse organization. People have a variety of positions on Israel. So it would be hard for me to speak for that organization, but I would like to make a couple of other connections. To the extent that I am able, I do some work in Colombia. And there are some ties, one of which, of course, is Caterpillar, which is a significant violator of labor rights in Colombia. We have a plant in the northern part of Colombia near the border with Venezuela. And they do use the services of paramilitary groups who do kill union organizers and others. And second of all, and I don't know why they do this, but Israel has chosen to provide counterinsurgency training to members of the Colombian military. Now, as you probably know, people have probably gone to picket or to demonstrate at the School of the Americas, where much of that takes place. But not all of it takes place there. A good deal of it takes place in Colombia, and Israel, along with the United States, sadly, has provided this kind of training. And why is this important? Well, the Colombian government, military has the worst human rights record of any Latin American military, and that's saying something. They have the worst. They are the best armed, the best trained, with U.S. aid, of course. And so there are some, from what we've talked about here, there are a couple of connections which are disturbing to me, but I guess not surprising.
Can I interrupt you and go back to our guest?
Oh, I'm done. I'm done.
Thank you for so much. I want to hear from you, and maybe we can have you back, and we can. Peter Dillard, who's come to us, his son was doing peace action work in Colombia and peace action work in Gaza, and so there is that connection, and he compared the two several years ago. So we'll have to get you Peter Dillard, who's a biologist, Walden Wallace, who does biological research in Colombia, that will hook you up with. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. How much time do we have left?
We have about half an hour. So we need to be on the road, but I want to comment on a few things that were just brought up. I think thank you so much for sharing that information, because one of the most important parts of our campaign is we chose companies that are representative of issues like throughout the region that affect refugees, that affect Gaza, that affect Palestinians within Israel and in the West Bank, because it's not, the occupation is a terrible thing, but it's not the only issue. So we wanted to address a lot of different things, and especially international connections as well. And also drawing to what you're saying, like non-Palestinians caring about this issue at our school. Our Multicultural Resource Center has sponsored our campaign, the South Asian Student Association, our Center for Women and Transgender People, and the Responsible Investing Organization. Very nice that they endorse. But we have a lot of other organizations considering it, but yeah, just to let you know what those connections are great to share. So,
Let Don talk. Don has spoken.
Where does Sabra Hummus come in on your list? Were they in the running? And do you know if that's any information about the Sabra Hummus company? I'm asking also just to say that they're going to be coming through town in Cleveland giving out free hummus, and I'm following their truck on Twitter to find out when, because they're going across the country.
Just to add, it's Sabra and Tribe as well.
Sabra and what?
Tribe hummus as well.
All I have to say about that is that Sabra is usually engaged in in boycott campaigns, not divestment campaigns, and Sabra is not present on our campus, so that wasn't really a consideration for us.
Kathy Kelly talked about DePaul having worked on boycott, maybe successfully. We didn't get to ask her. She was here last week. But I've read this up on this, and the CEO invests or donates or contributes to 2 military units that are, do you know that, Ruth? Maybe more than me? You want to say it?
No, continue, but yeah,
correct me or add to. That there are 2 rather aggressive units, I don't know that, that's all I can say about them, that are sponsored by Sabra, and they're out of Philadelphia, and so students in Philadelphia worked on this very hard, so it's something we could do, because I know a lot of the Heinens and many of those.
Giant Eagle.
Publix.
Say what?
Costco's me. Publix, it's south.
And I live on the freeway, and it's every freeway stop on night.
Every Giant
You
Eagle.
want to add something?
No, just that I think it may be Coca-Cola or Pepsi that's behind that.
And Doug, do you have anything? Okay, and so keep going. Thank you for. Oh, Don, you want to, before you're done, you have to speak about what happened to you in Bethlehem.
I can continue just while I have the floor a little bit. I traveled to the West Bank last year in March for Land Day, which is a recognized Palestinian commemoration of, I believe the year was 1986, when Israelis took over some land by force and some individuals, some Palestinians were killed. So, national movement, the Global March to Jerusalem last year was in coordination with Land Day, and typically on Land Day people marched to the borders of their nations and the border of Israel. And a couple of years ago we saw videos of family members who hadn't seen each other, brothers who hadn't seen each other in 30 years, reaching their hands to the barbed wire and you know, saying hello, and some actually jumped the barbed wire, and of course Israeli soldiers were nearby with their canisters of tear gas and weapons, and I don't think anyone was injured, but I got to check on that. But of course, now the year I went, there was quite a few casualties or you know, injuries at Bethlehem. We saw the tear gas flying. I was there with Mazen Kamsia. Let me have my book here real quick. Speaking of BDS, which is a nonviolent resistance to the occupation, to the military occupation, and too often we, in the media, characterize Palestinians as terrorists, and there's been many documented efforts of nonviolent resistance, and the BDS is one of them. And then Mazen Kamsia has a book here, Popular Resistance in Palestine, which goes from the 1800s till present, of the diplomatic and nonviolent actions that have been taking place by Palestinians, often shunned by the world community in that, and U.S. probably vetoing and things like this. So anyway, back to my trip, last year. We were just beginning to leave the area because the tear gas was being shot by the Israelis. And it was a nonviolent protest, albeit the youth were throwing stones at the wall. They weren't throwing stones at any soldiers or anything else. They throw stones. I'm sorry, that's their form of weapons. Nonviolent resistance, I guess you could say. In this country, that wouldn't be necessarily considered nonviolent at all. So, of course, then these are non-lethal rocks and everything. So then the Israelis answer with tear gas. And I don't know what started first, whether the rocks started first or the tear gas. But I did have this on my hat.
The occupation started first.
The occupation started first. And the 33 massacres that drove the Palestinians out started first, too, in 1948. But this was one of the hunger strikers, Qadr Adnan, resisting Israeli detention, indefinite detention, and arbitrary arrest. He's since been released. He was on a long hunger strike, and I had this on my hat. So, and I was standing near 3 ambulances. So why in the world is the tear gas canister flying over there? Did it bounce off the ambulance? Were they targeting the ambulances? You know. So I was hitting the head, and it didn't hurt that much. But 3 medics grabbed me right away, put me on a stretcher, took my head off, and outpoured the blood. took me to Beit Jala Hospital and took care of me quicker than Metro General. I mean, they were amazing.
Now, where did they make that canister?
Hit by a rubber bullet in his arm, and he was a mess, a Palestinian man. And you know, because I'm a U.S. Citizen, it's such a bad thing for us to get struck. But what about all the Palestinians that get struck every day?
Now, was that U.S.
And the
ordinance?
children.
Was that U.S. Made canister?
I wanted to go back and get the thing. I think it was a French one because I asked Mazen, and he thought they were using the French ones that day. French-made tear gas.
Right.
Now, also, we do make tear gas canisters right here in Pennsylvania, or near us. What's the name of it? Jamestown, Pennsylvania.
I don't know the company.
Combined
We're going to protest
systems.
them in the coming months.
Combined systems.
Combined systems.
system,
Someone
yeah.
said they flew an Israeli flag until the protests started coming, alongside the American flag in Pennsylvania, and they're sending tear gas to shoot down Bryant.
Yeah, we'll be protesting them in the coming weeks, so sign up on the list and we'll let you know.
Jamestown?
Jamestown, PA, yes.